Wandered across northeast India, teaching and gathering new disciples everywhere he went. You didn't have to become a monk or a nun to become a Buddhist. The Buddha's teachings were for everyone.
Animated fires burn like torchlights spread across the darkness. A cross-legged figure glows orange in the foreground.
Everything is burning. What is burning?
Distant mountains are consumed in fire.
The eyes are burning.
Ocean waves burn.
Everything seen by the eyes is burning.
The Bodhi tree drops flaming leaves.
The ears are burning.
A sitar burns.
What is burning? Everything heard by the ears is burning.
A tiger emerges from the flames. A bird.
The nose is burning. Smells are ablaze.
Incense and flowers burn, then dishes of food.
The tongue is burning. Tastes are ablaze. The body is burning. The mind is burning.
Stars hang in the sky behind the flames.
We're on fire. We may not know it, but we're on fire, and we have to put that fire out. We're burning with desire, right? We're burning with craving. Everything about us is out of control.
Poet WS Merwin.
The Buddha goes on to talk about the three poisons: greed and anger and ignorance, and how the three poisons are what is making the fire. And the way out of doing this is not to deny the three poisons, but to recognize that if you turn them round, you come to their opposites. Instead of greed, you have generosity. Instead of anger, you have compassion. And instead of ignorance, you have wisdom.
Outside, a monk swings a hatchet to cut down tree branches.
I can give my teachings in brief, the Buddha said. I can teach in detail. It is those who understand that are hard to find.
There are stories of people coming to the Buddha and saying, I am leaving your teaching because you have not told me about whether there is a life after death or whether there is another world. And the Buddha says, did I ever say that I would give you the answer to these things? No, Lord, you didn't. Why do you think that I never said that I would give you the answer to these things? Because these are not the things that you need to know. The thing that you need to know is how to deal with suffering. Because at this very moment, what made you ask that question was suffering.
A monk sits near stone carvings reading.
The Buddha was, above all, a pragmatist. He did not expect his followers to agree with everything he said. He encouraged them to debate and argue, to challenge him.
Buddhists say, my follower should not accept my teaching out of devotion, but rather your own experiment. Even Buddha himself, in order to get final enlightenment, need hard work. So investigate based on reason, through logical investigation. If something contradicts
His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
in the Buddha's own word, then we have the right to reject that.
An animated Buddha meditates at the center of a quivering lotus flower.
As the Buddha gathered more and more followers, stories spread of his miracles, which mixed the marvelous with the mundane.
One story tells how 500 pieces of firewood split at the Buddha's command.
Floating logs split in two and pile up into the form of the Buddha. An elephant rears.
In another, a mad elephant charged wildly down a street, forcing everyone to flee.
The Buddha sits in meditation as the beast charges him.
Only the Buddha remained, quietly waiting. The elephant, overcome by the Buddha's radiant kindness, knelt before him, and the Buddha patted his leathery trunk.
What is the meaning of miracle?
Subtitles. What is the meaning of miracle? A miracle is something unexpected. I think 100 years ago, jumbo jets or some of these computers or these, I think...
Or some of these really computers or these, I think, in their eye.
In their eye, this is something. Miracle.
Because miracle is something cannot understand. So now, I think within this century, we may find some new ideas or new facts. So far, we spend all our energy and time for research on matter, not internal world. This skull, small space, but a lot of mysterious things still there.
The great field of knowledge is as tiny as the Earth is in the universe. I mean, it's a speck. And the universe is what we don't know. And it will always be that way. However much we find out, it will still be that way. Because the unknown is vastly, it's unspeakably greater than anything we will ever know.
In animation, bright jewels twinkle along a cloud-like arch in the sky. The Buddha strolls along it above a city.
In one of the most storied miracles, the Buddha strode on a jeweled walkway suspended in mid-air, while streams of water spouted and flames flashed from his body, shooting out to the very edge of the universe.
Bursts of blue and red flow from the Buddha. They spread like sun rays.
And as the Buddha sat on a lotus flower giving his teachings, he replicated himself, filling the sky with multitudes of Buddhas for all to see and wonder.
Sky Buddhas strike varied poses.
Do we believe that literally? Does it matter whether we believe it literally? What many of those miraculous stories are about is the sheer wonder of it all. The very fact that the whole of unknown time and space has led to this very moment when we're sitting here talking to, when we are sitting here talking to each other, is utterly miraculous.
Sitting here in a room, having had a cup of coffee, having taken it out of a beautiful blue and white porcelain mug, what could be more miraculous than that? Everyday life around us is already so implausible and so glorious that what need for further miracles? And that's the teaching of the Buddha. That's the miraculous teaching of the Buddha.
Relief carvings depict armies carrying shields and spears.
Violence, the Buddha taught, always leads to more violence. To the slayer comes a slayer. To the conqueror comes a conqueror. He who plunders is plundered in turn. War was endemic in the Buddha's age, ravaging northeast India again and again.
Warriors hoist blades as armies face off.
Although kings and their ministers sought his counsel, the Buddha offered no grand political vision. He was powerless to stop the killing and the fighting. Even the men, women, and children of his former kingdom were massacred by a marauding king,
A painting chronicles the killing.
forced into pits, and trampled by elephants. It was said that the Buddha received the news in silence.
A statue of the Buddha wears a dot on his forehead. Subtitles appear as His Holiness the Dalai Lama speaks. Hundreds of them killed. So that day, Buddha was sad.
Buddha's human being.
Buddha is a human being, so he acted like a human being.
So sometimes he also, they fail.
So sometimes he also, failed. He failed to perform a miracle.
The Buddha failed, but We, as the Buddha, fail constantly. And part of our suffering is our failure, our recognition of our failure.
Buddhism doesn't argue with reality. There will always be both the potential for awakening in any moment and the potential for incredible damage at any moment. And if we fool ourselves into thinking we're past that, we will do incredible damage.
Change, the Buddha said, must come from within.
The Buddha starts always with the mind and talks about the violence in the mind and says that violence in the world is a result of violence in the mind.
A tree lives on its roots. If you change the root, you change the tree. Culture lives in human beings. If you change the human heart, the culture will follow.
Rippling water reflects a tree's widespread branches.
For decades, the Buddha shared his teachings all across northeastern India. Let all beings be happy, he taught, weak or strong, great or small. Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child. Barefoot in his robes, he was still walking the roads when he was 80, but old age was upon him. His back hurt, his stomach was often in pain. I am old, worn out, he told a trusted disciple, like a dilapidated cart held together with thin straps. The world is so sweet, he said, that he could understand wanting to live for at least another century. But he was frail and exhausted.
A weathered hut nestles between tall trees.
He became ill near Kushinagara, a remote village near the border of Nepal, when he was offered a meal which would prove deadly. The food was spoiled.
He ate what was offered to him, and it said that he knew it was bad, but he took it anyway because it was offered and didn't want the person who offered it to feel bad because it was his time.
A man prays facing a massive bronze statue of Buddha lying on his side under a blanket.
Today, Kushinagara is revered by pilgrims as the place where the Buddha finally left the world. It was in Kushinagara where he grew weak and asked to be laid on his side in a quiet grove of sal trees. As he neared the end, his disciples began to weep, stricken with grief.
In a painting, a disciple stands hunched over, jaw agape and weeping. Others toss their heads back with expressions of agony.
But the Buddha reassured them. All things change, he said. Whatever is born is subject to decay.
He's saying this is a natural process. He tells his disciples, use this time, use the energy here, even this, for your own awakening. So he used even his own death and their sadness as a time to remind them of what their real task was.
A mourner hides her face.
What he's actually doing is inviting those who are close to him into the experience. I don't think the Buddha's teaching in any way argues against grief or sadness or loss.
The teachings, if they make any sense, have to make sense in ordinary circumstances, in ordinary lives. And in ordinary lives, we grieve when we lose. We grieve. When it hurts, we say, ouch.
In a painting, the dying Buddha appears like a giant surrounded by tiny followers.
Buddhism is trying to look at things the way they are, the way it is, just as it is. It hurts. This is life. This is our life. And our relation to life involves losing it, too. You don't get beyond these things. You don't get beyond them.
It's all right to feel what human beings feel. And we are not supposed to turn into rocks or trees when we practice Buddhism. Buddhas laugh, cry, dance, feel ecstasy, probably even feel despair. It is how we know the world. It is how we live inside of our hearts and not dissociated from them.
The Buddha had always been saying goodbye. Now he prepared to leave the earth forever. He would never be reborn, never die again. It may be that after I'm gone, the Buddha told his disciples, that some of you will think, now we have no teacher. But that is not how you should see it. Let the Dharma and the discipline that I have taught you be your teacher. All individual things pass away. Strive on, untiringly. These were the Buddha's last words.
The animated Buddha lies on his side and slowly closes his eyes. Sparkling white sun rays shine down on him. A wide view reveals him alone among forest trees.
The Buddha died peacefully. His head was pointed to the north, his face to the west. The stories tell how the earth shook, and the trees suddenly burst into bloom.
Red blossoms sprout from the ends of branches.
Their petals falling gently on his still body, falling out of reverence.
Petals descend like falling feathers, dancing back and forth as they drop.
Divine coral flowers and divine sandalwood powders fell from above on the Buddha's body, out of reverence.
The petals gather in the folds of his robe, making an outline of his body. The petals fall apart, and the Buddha is gone. Sculpted disciples hang their heads and cry out in agony.
His disciples were quite upset. What are we going to do without our teacher? We will be lost without our teacher. But his instruction was so simple and so clear. I am not your light. I am not your authority. You've been with me a long time now. Be your own light.
A golden blanket shrouds a bronze Buddha lying on his side.
The Buddha saw death and life as inseparable. These are two sides of the same thing. Death is always with us. Death is part of the whole large unknown. And if we are unable to smile at the idea of the unknown, we're in real trouble. That's the realism that the Buddha was talking about, trying to come to terms with reality.
In animation, a figure rides off on a dark horse.
When he was 29 and still Prince Siddhartha, the Buddha had left his wife, child, and family to try and understand the nature of suffering.
Fade to the statue of Siddhartha as an ascetic, his emaciated face shrunken and alien. Then a statue depicts a full-faced Buddha staring ahead with a serene look, his hair in tight ringlets. Animation finds him cross-legged under the Bodhi tree as flower blossoms rain down.
He had attained enlightenment, shared what he had learned. and left a path for others to follow.
A barefoot monk treads across a beach. Fade from a sculpted Buddha to fires burning against a starry night sky. Red petals rain down on his deathbed.
Now he was gone. But before he died, he had asked his followers to remember him by making pilgrimage to the place of his death,
Present day, followers bow to the bronze statue.
to where he gave his first teachings,
White-clad pilgrims sit at the base of the stone tower in Sarnath, then the Bodhi tree.
where he achieved enlightenment,
At his birthplace, prayer flags crisscross overhead.
and where he was born.
Those 4 places mark out a sacred biography. And in tracing that pilgrimage route, you are learning the story of that life.
At places of pilgrimage, temples were built, images were installed, and relics were enshrined.
Millions of people get immense inspiration.
Subtitles: millions of people get immense inspiration. Buddha's spirit is always there.
Real,
But the real Buddha's holy place is within oneself. That's important.
that's important. So real Buddhist
So real Buddha's sacred place we must build within ourselves. We must build within our heart.
within our heart.
Although the Buddha had predicted that his teachings, like everything else, would in time disappear, Buddhism flourished in India for 1,500 years. Spread into Sri Lanka, Central and Southeast Asia, Tibet, China, Korea, Japan, and in the 20th century, to Europe and the Americas, adapting different forms and shapes wherever it took root, attracting many millions of men and women who practiced the Buddha's teachings both within and outside the monastic community.
A modern artwork uses bright colors and angular shapes to depict a serene face.
But everywhere, and in every age, the essence of the story remains the same.
The Buddha said that we've turned this world into a painful place. And this world does not have to be a painful place. This world can be a world inhabited by Buddhas. But it's up to each one of us to turn ourselves into a Buddha. That's the work.
If the Buddha is not you, finally the Buddha is of no interest to you. The Buddha is of such interest to you because you are the Buddha.
Every sentient being,
Every sentient being, even insects, have Buddha nature, the seed of Buddha.
seed of Buddha.
That's the seed of enlightenment. So therefore, there's no reason to believe some sentient beings cannot become Buddha. So like that.
Some sentient being cannot become Buddha. So like that.
I know that there are supposed to be preserved footprints of the Buddha, which are kept in one of the sacred places in India or Nepal. And, you can stand in them. And if you stand in them, maybe you realize, 10 toes, me too.
In animation, a man in a golden robe climbs a hill to the Buddha seated under a tree.
There is a story of a Brahmin who one day found the Buddha under a tree, calmly meditating. The Buddha's mind was still. He radiated such power and strength that the Brahmin was reminded of a tusker elephant.
An elephant morphs into the Buddha.
The Brahmin asked him who he was.
The Buddha morphs into a seed underground.
Imagine a lotus that had begun life underwater, the Buddha replied.
The seed sprouts up into the water and undulates like a snake. It grows a flower.
but grew and rose above the surface until it stood free.
Pink blossoms spread wide above the water.
So I too have transcended the world and attained the supreme enlightenment.
Flowers rained down on the Buddha.
Who are you then? The Brahmin wondered.
The Buddha opens his eyes.
Remember me, the Buddha said, as the one who woke up.
Now the Buddha sits alone on the hilltop.